ahead, Jim.
So great. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Today we're going to talk about creating order from chaos and talking about really a lot of the benefits that data management offer to manufacturers and to others in terms of allowing them to keep control of their design files, but also to share them with others. And I think it should be some really good content. So in terms of introduction, tongue-in-cheek, if you heard that Jim Brown was going to be presenting, or James Brown, or thought I showed up on the screen, I look a little like Jim Carrey, I'm told. I've got none of those skills or talents, unfortunately. Instead, I do have some background in industry with General Electric in manufacturing engineering. I spent time in management consulting and with enterprise systems in different roles. And then over the last dozen or so years, what I've been doing is doing research to really help companies understand what they can do with systems that really help drive better business value and really improve profitability. So I'm going to say, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff McCarowitz. I'm the design manager over here at Giffen. We're located in Auburn Hills, Michigan, and I've got 25 years of experience with the Autodesk products. So I'm here to offer, from a user point of view, my experiences.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. So Kevin Robinson. I'm here representing Autodesk today, and I look after the Autodesk Vault and our PDM and PLM businesses here. I've been at Autodesk Autodesk for about 3 years now. Been over 20 years of Autodesk product experience, and 10 years of that was either spent at a reseller or here at Autodesk helping customers like yourselves with different various customer solutions around PDM and PLM. So really excited to be here with Jim and Jeff today.
Great. Well, I think we all bring different perspectives, which is great. One of the things that I'm going to bring today that's going to serve as the backdrop of our conversation is a new research report that is just recently published. It's called The Facts About Managing Product Data. And we were really fortunate. We were able to get over 2,500 respondents to this research report. We actually offered it in 8 different languages, and the report's now been translated into, I believe, 7 languages, European as well as Asian languages, in addition to the base of English. We were able to attract a wide range of companies across multiple industries. They were in different sizes. So it was a really good survey sample, and really try to understand what it is that they're doing to manage their product data, what were their challenges, and we do something in our reports called performance banding, and you'll see that in some of the charts. What we try to do is identify those that are performing at a higher level than others. So you'll see something in here called top performers versus others. The top performers were the top 20 to 25% of the companies that self-reported as having better design efficiency. They were better able to meet their project costs and on-time engineering and development projects, as well as quality. And really overall, we're just doing a better job in product development. So we start with challenges, and one of the things that we see right off the bat is there are a good number of challenges, and they're pretty basic. If you're an engineer, if you're a designer, or if you're working downstream in an engineering, in a manufacturing company, and need some of that information to do your job, there's lots of places where people run into trouble around their product data. First is sharing with other departments. This is the kind of thing where oftentimes we get interrupted. We're trying to design something. We're working on an analysis or modeling out a product, and somebody comes in and they need a drawing, or they need some sort of a rendering, or they've got a question, and they can't get to that information themselves. So sharing has certainly been a challenge, and avoiding interruptions. But also finding the right information just for yourself, being able to reuse something that's out there. We all know that sometimes it's easier to recreate than it is to find something that either you've worked on before or somebody else has worked on before. And certainly that drives inefficiency as well. managing change, working on outdated data. These probably aren't surprises to any of you. And Jeff, maybe we'll start with you. I mean, you know, I'm sure you've never run into any of these challenges, right?
No, never. But real quick, if I can just share the not knowing what is the latest information. You know, our engineers or project managers would walk up to us and say, I need the latest drawing. And before, it was always the lead designer who would have to print that stuff out. Well, now with everybody logged into the Vault, they know exactly, based on the life cycle of the drawing, they know exactly where that drawing stays. So they know what the latest information is right at their fingertips. And it's not only here locally at our office, but if they're off-site, they have that information right at their fingertips. So that's proven very valuable for us.
Kevin, I imagine you deal with a lot of customers with similar challenges to this. Kevin, I'm not sure I'm hearing you. I'm not sure if others are.
Yep. Sorry about that. Had a little audio issue there. Yeah, so I have met a lot of customers and worked with a lot of customers that have had some of these design challenges. Probably the one that I see quite a bit here just in Metro Detroit, visiting customers face-to-face, is reuse. You know, a lot of customers are always looking to make sure that instead of redesigning parts from scratch or trying to find a solution from a past problem, they're always trying to come up with the best way to keep track of that. And unfortunately, many customers just rely on tribal knowledge or memory to solve that instead of a technical solution like Vault.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we try and look at is not just the challenges, but what are the impacts? You know, what is the business impact of all of these things? And you see that companies reported multiple impacts. Over half reported design efficiency. And you know, you talk about Kevin, you mentioned reuse. No better way to be inefficient than reinventing the wheel, right? You know, Jeff, you mentioned somebody, you know, people not having information at their fingertips and someone having asked them to print out a drawing. You know, certainly those are the kinds of things that I hear companies talk about all the time. But it also results in missed due dates, errors that result in rework, further causing inefficiency, missed, product cost targets, poor quality, project budget overruns. So some of these are related to the organization and to the efficiency of how products are being developed, but some of them actually show up in the product themselves. For example, poor quality can certainly have a big impact. Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit to it. I mean, I think that what I find really interesting about some of these results comes down to, out of all the years that I've worked with customers, most of the time when they're talking to us about Vault, they're just trying to solve the productivity challenge in engineering. They just look at it as, we want to make engineering more efficient. And that's absolutely a benefit, but as you can see here, there's a lot of other potential business impacts beyond just having engineering work faster and more efficient.
And if I could chime in too, the design inefficiencies, there's many times where through the product life of a drawing, you have many forks in the road. And the way we used to do it is save off these old versions in locations that only the designer knew, where now with the Vault automatically keeping all of our previous versions right in line, we know exactly when changes happened, why they happened, right there again at everybody's computer. So that's proven to be valuable as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and I absolutely, Kevin, I see the same thing you do in terms of the, efficiency being the driver, and a lot of times I hear people just say, we just have to manage the complexity. Things have just gotten too hard, and it results in all kinds of these business challenges. One thing that's interesting to point out is that, if over half are hitting design efficiency, more than a third are hitting missed due dates, a third with errors, that means companies are having, not just one of these, multiple of these are impacting their business. So, good. We actually did some research. This is actually a prior report on the non-value-added time that companies spend just managing product data. So, a big part of inefficiency tends to be really, just making sure that you've got the information in the right place. And we broke it down to different areas of inefficiency as well. But here what I'm going to share is that if you look, half of the companies spend more than 10% of their technical resources time on non-productive data management tasks. And if you go beyond that, that's half. The next one, what you'll see, is that a quarter of the companies are wasting more than 20% of their time on non-productive data management tasks. And this is of technical resources. This isn't an admin person or a clerk or somebody like that. These are our engineers, these are our designers, these are our analysts that are spending what really amounts to about a day a week, assuming we're only working 5-hour days or 5-day weeks, which may not be the case in all cases. But I like to ask people, what could you do with an extra day a week of engineering time in terms of either hitting your deadlines faster, iterating more, innovating more? So it really is something that we can't afford to waste this amount of time on data management. Jeff, you want to chime in at all?
Yeah.
Or?
We've got a couple of great stories that we've got our lead designers who are in charge of these projects, and when I walk by them previous to the Vault, ask them, what are you doing right now? If they have a spreadsheet open, and while I'm tracking all the revisions, making sure that they were sent out and the dates are all filled in, and to have somebody of a lead design's capabilities filling out paperwork and tracking revisions is a huge waste of time when they should be leading the job and progressing versus filling out this paperwork. And the automatic revision control that's in the Vault takes care of all that stuff. So all that when we thought we had a great system, everything's filled out in an Excel spreadsheet, and we knew exactly what we were doing. But until you start asking those questions, like, why are you doing it that way? There's a better way. And now we gain that time back. And how valuable is that to have your lead designers actually doing the work that they should be doing, not just writing on an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Kevin, anything to add to that?
Well, I think what you said about if those on the phone today are already working into the weekends and working overtime, obviously, reducing the amount of time on non-valuable tasks is going to be really important. So hopefully many of you could reduce your work week and just come in Monday through Friday instead of weekends.
All right. Well, you heard it here. We're all getting our weekends back, so that sounds great. I'm going to just talk a little bit about 3 fundamental basic capabilities of PDM, and Vault is a great example of these. This came from some research that I did and really talked to a bunch of companies really trying to understand where's the value that they get from product data management. And a lot of it did come down to managing complexity, but we broke it down into 3 general areas: control, really controlling information, providing access to it, and that's primarily within the engineering team, and then being able to share it with others, particularly those downstream in our businesses that need that information to do their jobs. So I'm going to walk through each of these real quickly. In terms of controlling product data, this is really the sort of the table stakes. This is where you have to start, is really being able to manage revisions, without all of our spreadsheets, as Jeff was saying, manage configurations, manage change. That tends to be a huge issue for companies, and also protecting intellectual property. And I think sometimes people hear protecting intellectual property and they think, oh, we're securing it from outside sources. A lot of times protecting intellectual property really just means making sure you save it and making sure you know where it is and other people can get to it, because lots and lots of times things on shared drives or hard drives, find a way to disappear. So, Jeff, is this some of the things you're doing with Vault?
Yeah, that is. Like I mentioned earlier, the previous version control with the Vault versus the old way we used to do things is people would save these old versions. They're like, okay, I want to capture this, and they would save it up on their hard drive. And later on in the week, be like, remember that one version you had? I can't find it on the network. Where do you have that? He's all on my hard drive. And that's notorious, and I'm sure some of our listeners out there have run into that same problem. I didn't want to delete it, so I saved it off on my hard drive just in case. And then, of course, nobody can get to that, right? and heaven forbid they're on vacation or they get sick one day, and then you miss all that time. Versus the Vault, you can go to any previous version. Every time you check it on the Vault, you have that. So again, that's valuable to us.
Yeah, Kevin, I imagine that's a lot of what you do in terms of developing capabilities within Vault or around some of these areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Jeff's point around saving things as a bunch of crazy names to keep track of all the different revisions is pretty common. But what's really important for a lot of customers is when they move from 2D to 3D, the amount of those exercises they're doing or different tasks they're trying to do when going from 2D to 3D doubles or triples. So for example, an AutoCAD DWG might be 1 file, an Inventor assembly or design might be 10 files. And so trying to do all of those naming conventions and keeping track of all those things become even more of a time waster. So controlling that data and protecting the IP is really important, but don't overlook the transition from 2D to 3D and how much more time that may take you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the move to 3D does tend to be a pretty big driver for people to sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back to move to a formal data management system. The second thing I talked about is access, and this is really the ability to quickly get the information and reuse it, or to find what you're looking for to make a modification, even something that's your own, that's work in progress. And it's about CAD, but it's also about other related product data. There's lots of other, whether it's requirements or specifications or calculations that typically go along with the product that is being developed in addition to the geometry that's in CAD. And it really, this access really helps save a lot of that non-value added time. It also does, change with interruptions. Another driver we see for companies to move to data management is when their organization gets a little bit more complex. For example, maybe they're doing something, some third-party design, like a third-party design firm that has to access files as well. And when you need to share things across the enterprise and potentially across locations, your shared drives and your spreadsheets start to really fall apart pretty quickly. Jeff, similar kinds of things with you?
Yeah, a quick story too. When we send our drawings into our customers, they approve them or they review them, put their comments to the drawings. And what we used to do before the Vault is the hard copies would come back and they'd be categorized and hung on a drawing rack. And then when we would need access to those, if a project manager or an engineer needed reference to those drawings, particularly if they're off-site, we'd have to go to that rack. Hopefully they were stored correctly. Right. Open that rack up, take it down to our scanner, scan the drawing in, and then email it to them. And I had several instances where the same set of markups needed to be either copied or looked at by different individuals. And we would have the same person, all right, I need you to go look at the rack again and find it. So what we're doing now today with the Vault is that same drawing that required the approval comments or came back with approval comments, we scan it in once and we link it through Vault to that drawing. So whether our engineering manager or project manager needs to see if that drawing went for approval first, he sees it right away with the Vault. And then he sees that there's a little link to it, and he clicks on it, and it goes right to those approval comments. So we have eliminated having to go to these racks and track all that stuff. And we don't actually have to keep the hard copy anymore because now it's all stored right in the Vault. And everybody, no matter whether they're in the office or off-site, they quickly have access to the same information that usually many people need access to, and they have access to it now quickly. And that speaks for itself right there.
Yeah, it sounds like you may have been in the day a week category and moved to a much better place. So, Kevin, similar to what you see in customers, and I think a big focus in Vault, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always important to manage the files and be able to benefit from having all of those in a central location. But then as you start granting other folks access to help make decision-making process faster, that's where you get a lot of great business gains.
Yeah. Yeah, and that brings us on to the next in the control access share paradigm is is sharing even outside of the engineering teams. And what we found with some other research is the more broadly you start to share data, the value goes up really exponentially. You start to get so much more out of it when you're sharing it with customers, when you're sharing it with suppliers. And it does all start with that control of one version of the truth, but then really making sure that manufacturing is always working off the most recent set of drawings, or that if somebody in service needs to look at the way something was designed and pull up a part, that they're getting the absolute right current information, or looking at a past revision and being able to get to that. And a huge way to protect the time of engineers to not have to bring that information up, but also helps people do their jobs better downstream, not just in engineering. Jeff, is this, you mentioned customers already, anything to add? Or?
Well, yeah, absolutely. On this one, I have actually had about 6 years ago in the previous company I worked for prior to their implementation of the Vault, we actually had, it was a machine shop, and we had things that were fabricated wrong, and it came out because they were working from old, outdated drawings. And when we went to the designer and the engineer, they're like, yeah, I changed that stuff, but it's still on my hard drive. I haven't put that on the server yet because I didn't have it done yet. And but meanwhile, that order's been released, and they actually were working from wrong drawings. So again, with the Vault, keeping the latest version right there at our fingertips, situations like that have a real cost impact, not just in the lost time of people trying to find the information, but actually real dollars where people are building the wrong materials.
Yeah, and probably the customer impact of it's going to end up late, and
Exactly. Yep.
Kevin, I know collaboration is something I've talked to you about before, and being able to share. What would you like to add?
Yeah, I think one thing that a lot of folks overlook is that when you invest in a Vault license, as an example, they're floating licenses. So a lot of people overlook that. So even if you're starting small and just getting going with Vault, you can float those licenses around the network and have either other engineers take advantage of it or others in the department take advantage of the power of the Vault. That's one way to share. And another way to share is we actually have a web client, which is a much simpler UI for view, search, and print. So whether it's a customer, a sales rep, someone in purchasing who doesn't want all of the functionality, they're just a few clicks away from taking advantage of all that knowledge.
Fantastic.
I'm going to comment on that real quick, Jim.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Having you bring up a good point, the fact of the floating license, because we actually started our implementation with 11 licenses, and we had to add on a few designers in the meantime, so we ran out of those licenses, and then we bought another 11 because we knew that the engineers were going to get on board. So now we have 14 designers all using out of the 22 licenses because they're in it full time, but our engineers who are not on the Vault full time, they tap into those floating licenses as needed. And again, the floating license is huge to make sure that you get that. And the people that don't require the access right away, or they're not in it all day, they just come in and go as they need it.
Fantastic, fantastic. The same way, excuse me, the same way that we looked at the business impacts of some of the challenges, I like to do the same when we look at the control access and share, and you see some of the operational benefits that you can get out of PDM, but we also like to talk about some of the business level benefits. And here's just a sample that we see in our research in terms of improved time to market, which can certainly give people first mover advantage, especially a lot of smaller companies that compete against the big guys through agility and being able to beat them to the punch. But we see improvements in quality and reduced errors. We see less more efficiency and less wasted time related to that, reuse, and then also we mentioned IP protection. And in fact, not on the screen here, but a couple of stats from some of our research. We find that those top performers, if you remember, I mentioned before our performance banding in our research. We look at who is really doing the better job at on time, on target, on budget, quality, quality and efficient work in their design process. And those that were of that top 20 to 25%, the top performers, they're actually 30% more likely to be using a structured system and 30% more likely to be using PDM as compared to some other solutions. But the results of that are, if we look before at how many people were spending a day a week, what we see is that they're actually 25, those top performers are spending 25% on wasted time. So clearly some important benefits. Okay. And here's actually, we'll roll on a little bit here to some of the top performers, but actually, if we can, maybe we'll just spend a minute and talk about those, see if Jeff and Kevin want to add anything onto those benefits.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than, over time, I mean, in some form or fashion, even if we start with productivity, which is really all about the less wasted time, the end result when we talk to management or executives, just because the engineers freed up 8 or 10 hours, it doesn't mean any of them are going to leave that day any sooner. So we got to find other business impact of what they can do with that gained time and other possible benefits like reducing rework or any type of errors that are overlooked.
Jeff, any benefits you guys? I know it's always hard to quantify some of these things, but
it is. No, I think you guys have it covered pretty well. The only thing I guess I can add is some of the things that they are difficult to quantify. But if you're concerned about the PDM actually helping you, it was a hard time for me to convince management here because of, again, they're used to doing it their way. We think we have a great system. I don't see that's going to impact us. Well, this is my second implementation at this company. I've done it before, so I knew what the benefits were. And when I came here and I witnessed what they were doing, even though you're preaching that this stuff works, it works, I still couldn't get them to totally buy in. So we did a small implementation where we started out with just a small group on one project just to prove it out. And then once they got it, it just quickly snowballed. So yeah, it's hard to quantify these things, but I guess trust me or believe me that I've done this now twice, and I can see the benefits, and others quickly see it as well once they start using it.
Yeah, Jeff, I remember the first time you and I talked, or you said something about once you've been to the promised land, it's hard to go back and work in an unstructured way again. I thought that was a great comment. So to move forward, let's go ahead and bring up some stats here. And I mentioned before, that these top performers are much more likely to use more structured solutions, and that results in them really spending less non-value-added time. And we see that PLM and PDM both are the top two structured ways that companies look at. And we see just a drastic difference between the number of top performers and others that are using those. And but I think the other side of it is on this next slide. What you'll see is that the top performers not only are more likely to use PLM and PDM, they're also much less likely to use the unstructured methods of network and shared drives, local hard drives, and paper-based files. Doesn't mean that they don't. It just means that they're less likely. And you see lots of people still use email. Lots of people still use some portals or web-based file sharing. But those are more equivalent. So the things that tend to seem to make the biggest difference are this structured approach up at the top versus the unstructured approach toward the bottom. I'm not sure if anybody wants to add anything to that, or if that just confirms a little bit about what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, nothing to add from my point of view. I think it really hits the nail on the head, though, on all the different options they have.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is if you total them up, they clearly add up to more than 100%. The bottom line is people are doing things in a lot of different ways, and even if you are using PDM, there are still lots of other things that people are using in conjunction. But again, those that are using PDM are doing much better.
Yeah, actually, Jim, just one thing to add. I was visiting a customer a couple years ago, And I was starting to educate them a little bit about some of their options with their reseller. And Vault was a natural solution for them for their engineering files. But what's also really important is, as you look at this, is there's a lot of other data types and a lot of other formats that are impactful to engineering. So whether it's a sales proposal, whether it's photos from a field study, whether it's a PDF of the customer's request or requirements. When I visited with this particular customer, when I asked them how they track all those, they really just went to a file cabinet, grabbed a really, really, really big folder, and it was a combination of almost everything they can imagine for every decision and every point of view they had from every meeting in one big folder. And as part of working on the solution with them, they actually gave me that folder and told me I could take that and use that to help study and prepare for how we were going to help them with Vault. And at the end of the day, they were able to get rid of those types of folders by having everything in one central area.
And probably no chance at revision control on a customer requirements document if you've got 3 of them running through the folder at different, different places, right?
Yep.
Jeff, do you ever have any folders, paper folders? I heard about the racks. How about folders?
Yeah, no, never.
All right, the witness says no. It's interesting, Kevin. You mentioned the the different file types, and one of the things we tried to do is break down a few myths about data management. And one of them you'll see on this next slide is that PDM is not just for 3D CAD. And you mentioned, Kevin, very rightly that when people go to 3D, the complexity goes up. You've got multiple files. They all need to be, kept in a related way so that when you open the model, everything opens up, correctly, and each of those get revisioned correctly. So 3D tends to be a big driver. But if you look, we looked at those in blue are the ones that have 2D systems as their primary design system, and those in red are those that have 3D as their primary design system. And there is more of a predominance of using paper-based files, local drives. But we definitely see that lots and lots of different types of information are used both by people that are running 2D as their primary tool and those that are running 3D. So absolutely what you said. The interesting thing is you do see so much more PDM in companies that have 3D as their primary tool because it sort of forces them into it. But when we looked at the benefits and who are the top performers, there are plenty of 2D companies that are using PDM and getting much better performance compared to others. So the benefits really are there for non-3D users as well.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, I think that, Jeff, I'm curious your point of view on some of the things around 2D drawings, but what I found with a lot of customers is they have years and years and years of AutoCAD DWGs stored in a pretty complex folder structure. Then they have the spreadsheet, and then they have the change orders. And if you combine all of those together, you can kind of piece together what happened on projects in past, or you can find drawings that way by tying all 3 together. One of the great things about the Vault is that just by adding old AutoCAD drawings into the Vault, you've essentially made all of those years of past engineering projects more discoverable without a lot of work. I mean, basically, any piece of attributed information in a title block or any piece of text in an AutoCAD drawing, once it's in the Vault, can now be searched on. So instead of just trying to remember, add it to the Vault and start searching for it.
Absolutely, Kevin. I think I just lost my. Do you still have me?
We have your voice.
Okay, there we go. So in this industry, this company that I'm currently working at, we started our implementation in May of 2013. So we're getting close to our second full year of using the 3D along with the Vault. So that was our original primary start of our implementation. They wanted a controlled implementation, so we started with 3D. But again, we have all this legacy data of years and years, 25 plus years or more of legacy 2D data, 2D drawings. And quickly, I had some of our groups, because again, we started with 6 seats of 3D along with the Vault, and we were kind of working under one little project. And I actually had one of our lead designers come up to me one day, and he goes, Jeff, I need to have control of who went into a drawing and when. And I said, well, without the Vault, you really can't do that. You don't know who went into your drawing and possibly save something. So the 2D side of it wanted to get on board with the Vault as well. So the controlled implementation of the 6 proved out very quickly that we could do this stuff, and then everybody else wanted it. And so to show them that they have control of, okay, somebody went into my drawing, now the Vault tells them exactly who went in and why, and you could, if they made a mistake on that change, they quickly revert back to what it was by using the previous version without losing anything and without losing any time, because you have all that information again right at your fingertips. But they know who made the change, and they can go and actually talk to that person and ask them, you know, did you get information from somebody else that I should know about? But prior to that, again, there was no way of knowing it. It was his word against everybody else's if somebody went in there and did that change. And then also with the Vault managing the reference files. So in our 2D history, we have heavy reference files attached to our AutoCAD files. And I'm sure many of our listeners, too, who use reference files in the AutoCAD world, if you change the location of that drawing that had reference files attached to it, unless you had it set up right, you would have to go in there and relink all those reference files to that AutoCAD, where the Vault does that automatically for you. Even in the 3D world, you can move files around as you need early on in the design. A lot of times it happens. You have to change folder structure or slide things around. Without the Vault managing and linking all that stuff automatically for you, you could spend hours relinking all those drawing reference files to the drawings. So again, that was something we couldn't do. A lot of times you didn't want to rename something or move something because you knew all the work that would have to go into reattaching all those reference files. So absolutely, it works in the 2D and 3D world. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just to add one question for you, Jeff. Just kind of a open-ended question, but I'm sure you guys make a lot of project decisions using email, or a lot of ongoing discussions going in email, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have we file all of our correspondence into our jobs because many times we have to revert back to why was that decision made, or you know, design reviews that we would have, and all that documentation then can either be right in the Vault or it can be linked to that drawing. So say, for instance, you're having a design review on a certain product and you know the drawings that are affected by the design review, you can have that document linked to those drawings. So that information, you don't have to remember what file or what folder that was stored into and what drawings did that affect, because a lot of times you might remember the design review, but you won't remember the drawings that were affected by it, or vice versa. You remember the drawing, but you can't remember what date was that design review happened. If you link that stuff using the Vault, you can search it either way. And again, to have that information not only for our designers, but our project managers, all the different groups that need access to that information, to have it linked using the Vault, tied to either the drawings or those design reviews, saves a bunch of time searching, and it saves going and asking somebody a question. Hey, do you remember when we did that? You know, all that interruption time kills you, and I'm sure everybody out there, the biggest killer in engineering design is the interruptions, because you have to stop what you're doing and remember to go back at what you were doing. So to have, again, all that information there and eliminating the interruptions, again, is a valuable tool using the Vault.
Great. So you know, one of the things, given the benefits that we've seen, and you know, through this report as well as others, we decided to, in this report, to try and find out why doesn't everybody use PDM. So you know, we asked companies, what they used, and those that didn't use PDM or use the PDM components of a PLM system, why weren't they using it? And I like to start on the far right side of this, and that only 8% of the companies said that the reason they're not using it is because they don't have any problems related to data management. So there are some companies that maybe have very simple environments. She just did another paper on single shingle companies. We've got one designer, and even they like to use PDM. But in a simple environment, maybe you can get away with it. But as you start to move across, you see that a couple of the biggest reasons are cost and resources, and specifically IT resources to implement. And so we believe that this is somewhat of a myth. And again, I mentioned before, we're trying to break some of the myths with this report, and they're more in the actual report itself. But what do you guys think on this? And then we've got a little bit of data we're going to jump into in just a minute. But Jeff, you didn't fall into the 8% in either of your companies, that's for sure.
No, but again, I've gone through, this is my second implementation, and the previous company that I helped put this through, there were 2 engineers working on it. And I remember the gentleman that was working in there, he was fighting the whole vault concept because he didn't understand it. Again, because he was so used to doing the I've got no problems, because you don't understand how easy it is to actually use the vault. So again, you can fall into that with a small company where, yeah, I don't have any problems, and that's only because you're used to doing it the way that you're doing it until you see the bigger picture. And like Jim said to me before, when I see how this stuff works, and I have to show a company, how to implement this stuff, when you see how it works, how well it works, and you know what the promise plan looks like to kind of come back to kind of a cave dweller type mentality where I have no problems because I know what I'm doing, but you don't realize how much time you're wasting to show people that once they get that light, it's really one of the satisfying things to see people work very productive. And when they're working productive, they're happy in their job.
Yeah. Jeff, I think I'm going to change my methodology and have top performers and cave dwellers. I think that would be nice. Kevin, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think one option that wasn't in the survey here would have been engineers and engineering managers saying we don't want anyone else to know how bad it is inside of engineering in terms of things being unorganized or hard to find. And I think that sometimes that stark reality of not wanting to let others know maybe a little bit how unorganized or how uncontrolled it is will fall into one of these other categories, like I don't understand the benefits or there's too few resources. But I think the other one I would see as a right-in answer is more like they don't want other people to know how bad it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So addressing the myths of cost and resources, we definitely did hear, and I hear on a regular basis as I'm traveling around, that PDM costs too much and it takes too long to implement. And if you look at these, a half of the companies spent less than $100,000 to implement PDM, and a quarter, or about a third actually, spent less than $25,000. And from a time perspective, you see that about a quarter took less than 3 months, and you get up to half by going up to the 7 to 12 month category. So one of the things I'm quick to point out to people is that PDM does not have to cost a lot of money, and it doesn't have to take a long time. It can, and I think that's where a lot of the big horror stories come from. If you're getting into what I like to call the multis, multinational, multi-departmental, and you're really, multilingual even in some cases, when you're trying to make very big, complex implementations with lots of process change, then the cost goes up and the time goes up. But many people are able to get Vault in, and other PDM systems in very quickly at a very reasonable cost. And so I really think that there's a big myth involved in the fact that it has to cost a lot and take a long time. Jeff, you want to add in? You've been through this a couple of times, so.
Yeah, I'd like to just quickly back up what I have said earlier. The fact that we started our implementation here with 6 designers. So again, it was a very controlled implementation. We planned out a year timeline where we knew what we wanted to achieve by when, and we had those milestones dated so that we could prove out to management, yeah, this is what we're able to do by when. But very quickly, we beat that timeline because others started to see the benefits and they wanted on board. But if you want a control environment, plan it out, keep it controlled, stay on task, and then you'll see the benefits of it. Because I've seen it the other way too, where we've tried to do a company-wide implementation of different softwares or different programs, and it does take a long time because now you're involving twice as many people, and it's hard to train everybody all at once. So we found, again, that having a small controlled implementation and then have it mushroom out from there very quickly has been successful, at least for me.
Yeah, I think I was at a conference last weekend into the weekend, and they were talking about the hardware, the software, and the wetware. The wetware being us carbon-based life forms that are involved in things like this, and it tends to be the carbon-based thing that takes longer and more time. So the more people, the more change that people have to absorb. And maybe some bigger benefits from that. But getting it in and getting it going small is a great approach. Kevin?
Yeah, I agree with that approach quite a bit. I've actually worked with customers in the past that had those really complex product structures, and there was cases where even maybe a single engineer would put some of his project data into Vault just so they could benefit from some of the productivity gains as an individual user Vault brings. But then the just point is that if you have 25 years of legacy AutoCAD data and you have other departments that you want to bring online, trying to do all that as phase one is not going to be a great path to results. Starting slow, coming up with a small digestible pilot of some reasonable metrics, which might just be file organization, and having engineering operate a little bit more efficiently is a great first step, and then sharing with other departments could be a next step. So over the years, I've just seen, CAD file management as a beginning stage, and then all the evolutions of where PDM could take a company are going to come over time. But if any Autodesk partner or any vendor tells you that you can have complete PDM fully implemented in just 5 days, sign here, that's not the case. You can absolutely be beneficial and have benefits in engineering in a couple days with Autodesk Vault, but all of those other resources, workflows, methods, and methodologies that your company does today as tribal knowledge, you essentially have to implement that with Vault over time. You're not going to turn that on overnight. So start small, start smart, get results, and then move on to the next phase.
Yeah. Yeah, and PDM can offer a fantastic growth opportunity and improvement opportunity over time. Once you get the core infrastructure in, there's so much more you can do with it just by incrementally adding on. And actually, starting small was one of the best practices that I've talked about for a long time, and we decided to test that in this report because there is some myths around that as well. And so we looked at our top performers versus our cave dwellers on this one. And I shouldn't call people cave dwellers. I've lived with plenty of non-top performing processes, and I'm sure I still do today. But the top performers, if you look at how many started small in the blue with a limited scope, or started with a moderate scope in the red versus a relatively full scope in the green, and you compare that to others, it's really not significantly very different. So what does that mean? It means that starting small doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end small. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get benefits. We see that the companies that start small are just as likely to be top performers as other people are. So it's definitely best practice to get it in less expensively and faster, but it also doesn't stop you from getting the benefits of being on time, more efficient, on budget, higher quality, and those sorts of benefits. So, anybody have anything they want to share or add on to that one?
I just want to add on to Kevin's point that schedule your implementation, stick to it, and celebrate the successes or share your successes, because that's when you start to have people get on board. Is you have to be successful at something quickly, because otherwise it'll drag on and it'll get kind of a bad rap. So you have to celebrate those successes, stay on task, and that's how I've been successful. Now I'm batting 1,000 and 2 for 2.
Yeah, well, and Jeff, one of the things I know from your implementations, because you've done that, is you don't have to push phase 2 and phase 3, right? I think you mentioned to me before that, and I think you even said it earlier on the call. The 2D users started saying, "Hey, I want some of that too." And so, when you prove those successes, you get pull from the organization instead of having a push.
Absolutely, yeah. What easier way to convince people to use it when they're actually asking for that tool? So yeah, and we're starting to see that now. Like I said earlier, you start small and it mushrooms out. We've mushroomed out not only in design into our engineering and project management, but now out on our shop floor, they're actually asking for the software and the ability to actually get it, so that we don't have to feed them that information. They can go right in and get it. So that's, yeah, what better way than to have somebody actually ask you for it.
Fantastic. So we're going to wrap up a little bit with some key takeaways, and we don't normally do this, but because we addressed so many myths in the report, we decided to sort of put a nice ribbon on this one with some myths and some facts. And you can read these, if you're watching this, as easy as I can. But we really, again, PDM is not just for 3D. It's not all or nothing. You can really start and grow over time, and in fact, that's the best practice and won't stop you from getting to the higher level of benefits. And some of the other things we looked at is company size. Companies of all sizes benefit from PDM, and even companies of 2. And Kevin, you mentioned individual people trying to just keep their work organized. And it's not only for managing CAD. And there's a few more on the next slide, and then maybe we'll have everybody provide a little wrap up on their own. But it's also not just engineering; it goes way outside, and we see the benefit. Top performers use PDM more outside of engineering, in addition to inside, and we see those benefits go up. And again, the main thing that I think people need to hear is that it doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. So, Jeff, anything to wrap up?
Just a final comment that in order to be successful at this implementation is, one, stay on track. Make sure that you meet with your key users regularly to make sure that they're using it the right way and the best way. Because again, it has to be easy and they have to enjoy it, because otherwise they may revert back to their old ways, and you'll have to pull them out of the cave again. So meet regularly with them, celebrate the successes, and that's how you can be successful.
Kevin?
Yeah, I have a few call to action points I'll talk to in just a second here, but Jeff, just one question that came up from someone in the audience as we were going through here is, when you started doing the initial pilot to help convince management to make the investment, who else was kind of part of the team as some key stakeholders to help you convince management?
Well, the key that I had to prove was our department manager, who's been using just vanilla AutoCAD and Excel spreadsheets for many, many years, and he was, again, one of the ones who said, well, I've got no problems because the system I have works. And yeah, it works, but look at how much time you're wasting. So when we did the first test, we put the drawings in front of them, and this was a big part of going from the 2D to 3D is, how are my drawings going to look? Are they going to look any different? So presented the whole project to them and said, okay, can you tell the difference on these drawings? Do they look any different than what you're used to producing for not only your reports, but the way the drawings look? And he said, no. I said, well, okay, well, this whole project was done using the Vault and using our 3D. And again, he couldn't tell the difference at all. They looked exactly the same what he's used to, but we were able to produce the results in a much more organized fashion and with less time.
Okay. And so that was the engineering manager, Jeff, or is that someone else in the executive team that was part of that decision?
That was our engineering manager, so he was my first person to kind of get by before I could get up to upper management.
Okay. Cool. Well, I just wanted to confirm that was one of the questions that someone had typed in. So, you know, from my point of view, just as a call to action for everyone, just a few that are pretty easy. So Jim has gone through and highlighted a lot of great findings from the white paper. So a couple different ways to get that white paper. Either work with your Autodesk partner and schedule some time to go through it together with them. Go to the Tech Clarity website and download it directly if you just want to take a read at it. Jim talked about 3 critical points: control, access, and share. And I would say after you read the white paper, establish your own point of view on, maybe grade yourselves on how you're doing on control, access, and share. Maybe pick 1, pick 2 that you think are really important that your company should start investigating. All right? And then the last piece, you know, after you've kind of graded yourself on control, access, share, maybe build kind of your own point of view as a CAD manager, engineer, engineering manager, executive on what you guys want to do around PDM to fall closer into the top performer category. So again, review the white paper, work with your reseller, download it from the website directly, get your own point of view, establish your own point of view for control, access, and share, and figure out where you're at on the top performing roadmap and start drawing out your path and take some steps.
All right. Well, you know, on behalf of myself and you know, also you know, and also Autodesk, I'd like to thank Jeff, you for participating. I think you know, sharing your real-world experience is invaluable for people that are going to be following in your footsteps. So thank you for your time today. Certainly hope everybody got something out of this, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jeff. And if anyone wants to keep typing in some questions, we'll stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes here to answer any online. But thanks, everyone.
Thank you.